The universe did not care about dreams. It did not care about hopes or wishes or the small moments that made life worth living. Captain Michelle learned this truth the hard way when she received her first assignment to Station Omega. The outpost sat on the edge of human territory, a lonely place where miners dug into asteroids and scientists studied the strange rock formations that floated in the darkness of space. Michelle had served in the military for 12 years, and in all that time she had never been to a place so quiet, so isolated, so far away from everything that mattered. When she arrived at the station, she found that only women worked there. Engineers, soldiers, scientists, and support staff. All women. All waiting for their new commander to give them hope or take it away. Michelle was 38 years old, with brown hair that she always kept in a tight bun and gray eyes that had seen the worst parts of human nature. She shook hands with each member of her team and listened to their stories. There was Amy, the tactical officer who had lost her family to pirates when she was only 16. There was Caroline, the chief engineer, who had invented 3 new weapon systems and been rejected for promotions 5 times because men in leadership positions thought she was too young. There was Lisa, the medical officer, who had been forced to leave a top hospital position because she asked for better conditions for her team. There was Rebecca, the security chief, who had been told her whole life that she was too aggressive for a woman. And there was Sarah, the communications specialist who had been bullied so much in her early career that she almost quit the military entirely. Michelle looked at these women and saw something that no one else seemed to see. She saw strength. She saw intelligence. She saw people who had been pushed down their whole lives and were tired of accepting it. That night, she called them all to the command center and told them something that would change everything. She told them that she believed in them. Not in the way that commanders usually believe in their crews, but in a different way. She believed that together they could become something great. She believed that they were just as good as any military force in the galaxy, and maybe even better. The women listened to her words and something shifted inside them. For the first time in their lives, someone in authority was telling them that their gender did not matter. What mattered was their skill, their courage, and their will to survive. Michelle began training them immediately. She worked them harder than any commander in the military had worked them before. But it was different from the harsh training they had experienced in the past. Michelle trained them with a purpose. She taught them about alien species and how they thought. She showed them how to use their intelligence to overcome superior numbers. She taught them that fighting was not always about who was strongest, but about who was smartest. The weeks turned into months, and the women of Station Omega became something different. They became a team. They became soldiers. They became warriors who understood each other so well that they could communicate with just a glance. They practiced ambush tactics and defensive maneuvers. They studied the weapons of 20 different alien species. They learned how to survive in the void of space and how to repair their station with almost no supplies. One day, Caroline came to Michelle with a discovery that would change everything. The chief engineer had found a way to hide the entire station from advanced sensor systems. It was something that should have been impossible, but Caroline had figured it out. She had taken human technology and combined it with some ancient Zarathian technology they had found in their asteroid mining operations. The result was a stealth system so advanced that even the most powerful warships in the galaxy would not be able to detect them. Michelle felt something like hope for the first time since she arrived at Station Omega. She realized that they had been preparing for something without even knowing it. The galaxy was getting more dangerous. More alien species were moving into human territory. More conflicts were breaking out. It was only a matter of time before someone came to Station Omega, and when they did, the women would be ready. The commander spent her evenings studying reports from the outer colonies. She read about the Zarathians and their conquests. They were beings who had conquered 17 planets in the last 50 years. They believed that strength was the only thing that mattered, and they ruled through fear and force. They had never been defeated by a smaller force. They had never been defeated by beings they considered weak. Michelle knew that if the Zarathians ever came to their station, it would be the test of everything she had taught her team. She hoped it would never happen. She prayed that her women would live their lives in peace and never have to face such a terrible enemy. But deep in her heart, she knew the truth. Fate was coming for them, and when it arrived, everything would change forever. The women of Station Omega continued their routines, mining asteroids and conducting their research, but now they did it with a secret knowledge. They knew they were warriors. They knew they were ready for anything. They knew that their commander believed in them, and that belief gave them strength. Michelle watched them from her office and felt proud. She had not created soldiers. She had created something much more important. She had created women who believed in themselves, and that, she knew, was the most powerful force in the universe. The alarm bells did not ring the way Michelle had always imagined they would. There was no dramatic warning. There was no time for grand speeches or final preparations. Sarah detected the ship on long-range sensors one morning when she was drinking her coffee in the communications room. The cup dropped from her hands and shattered on the metal floor. She stared at the screen in front of her, hoping that what she was seeing was some kind of mistake. It was not. A massive Zarathian warship was heading toward Station Omega, and it would arrive in less than 3 hours. Sarah's hand shook as she activated the alert system. Within seconds, alarms began to sound throughout the entire station. Every woman dropped what she was doing and moved toward her assigned position. Years of training had prepared them for this moment, but Sarah knew that nothing could truly prepare you for the moment when you realized you might die. Michelle was in her quarters when the alarm started. She did not hesitate or feel fear. Instead, she felt something like calm certainty. This was what she had been waiting for. This was why she had trained so hard and pushed her team so far. She moved quickly to the command center, her mind already running through 100 different scenarios and strategies. Amy was already at the tactical station when Michelle arrived. The younger woman's face was pale, but her hands were steady on the controls. Michelle placed her hand on Amy's shoulder and squeezed gently. That single gesture said everything that needed to be said. You are ready. You are strong. You are not alone. Caroline was in the engineering section, making final checks on the stealth system. The chief engineer had tested this technology 1,000 times, but this would be the first time they would use it in actual combat. She talked to herself as she worked, running through every possible problem and how to fix it. The Zarathian ship grew larger on their screens as it approached. It was a massive vessel, the size of a small mountain with weapon systems that could destroy entire cities. The warship hailed them, and a voice came through the communication speakers. It was deep and cold and filled with absolute certainty. The voice belonged to Commander Krell. Michelle had read about him in military reports. He was 400 years old. He had conquered 17 planets. He had never lost a battle. He had never shown mercy. And he had never faced anyone like the women of Station Omega. The commander's voice filled with amusement when he saw that the station was controlled by women. He laughed, a sound like boulders grinding together in the darkness. He told them that they had 1 hour to surrender, or he would destroy them completely. He said that human women were soft and weak, that they did not belong in space, that they should go back to their homes and let real warriors handle the galaxy. Michelle listened to every word, and she felt anger rise inside her like a fire, but she did not show that anger. Instead, she smiled. She had been waiting her whole life for a moment like this. She had endured rejection and dismissal, and people telling her she was not good enough, and now finally she had a chance to prove them all wrong. She activated the stealth system herself, her finger moving across the control panel with certainty. The entire station seemed to shudder and shift. Every light flickered and changed. The ship's systems rerouted through the hidden channels that Caroline had created. When the process finished, the station had vanished from all Zarathian sensors. It was still there, still real, still a physical object in space. But to anyone trying to detect it from a distance, it had simply ceased to exist. On the Zarathian warship, Commander Krell watched as the human station disappeared from his screens. For the first time in 400 years, he felt something like confusion. His officers looked at each other and did not know what to do. The commander had never encountered an enemy that could simply vanish. He ordered all weapons systems to search the area randomly, firing at the places where the station should have been. Energy bolts streaked across empty space. Nothing hit. Nothing connected. The women of Station Omega watched the Zarathian weapons fire harmlessly past their hidden position. Michelle began giving orders in a voice that was quiet and calm. Amy moved the massive cannons that they had hidden inside the asteroid. Caroline rerouted power from non-essential systems to the weapons. Lisa prepared the medical bay for incoming casualties. Rebecca positioned her security teams throughout the station, and Sarah sat at her communications console, recording everything that happened, making sure that the rest of humanity would know what occurred here today. The Zarathian commander was becoming frustrated. He had ruled through fear and strength his entire life, and this situation was one that he did not understand. He ordered his assault teams to prepare for landing, deciding that if his weapons could not find the humans, his soldiers would. Drop pods descended from the warship like rain, carrying 50 elite Zerathian warriors in full combat armor. Each warrior was trained for decades in hand-to-hand combat. Each one was stronger than 10 human soldiers. Each one had fought in 100 battles and never lost. But they did not know what they were flying into. They did not know that the women of Station Omega had studied every weapon system in the galaxy. They did not know that the women had trained for scenarios like this 1,000 times. They did not know that they were about to face warriors who had something that no Zerathian warrior possessed. They were about to face women who had everything to lose and were determined not to lose it. As the Zerathian soldiers entered the station through the docking bays, Rebecca and her security teams waited in the shadows. The lights had been dimmed throughout the corridors. The hallways had been turned into a maze of ambush points and hidden positions. The Zerathian warriors expected to find confused and panicked humans running around in fear. Instead, they found nothing but darkness and silence. Then the shooting began. It came from everywhere at once, from above and below and from both sides of the corridors. The Zerathian warriors tried to advance, but there was nowhere to advance to. There was nowhere to hide. There was nowhere to run. Michelle watched the battle from the command center, monitoring every camera and every weapon system. She made corrections and gave orders in a voice that never wavered. The women under her command followed those orders without hesitation. They fought with precision and courage and intelligence. They fought like soldiers who knew they were fighting for their lives. They fought like women who refused to be underestimated ever again. The first group of Zerathian warriors fell within minutes. The second wave came and the women were waiting for them. The battle raged through the corridors of Station Omega, but it was a battle that the Zerathians could not win. They were stronger, but the humans were faster. They had more firepower, but the humans had better tactics. They were experienced in conquest, but the humans were fighting for survival. And in the end, survival was the stronger force. By the time the third wave of Zerathian soldiers arrived at Station Omega, something had changed. The women had tasted victory in small moments, and that taste made them stronger. They moved with increased confidence. They anticipated enemy movements before they happened. They fought like they belonged in combat, like they had been born for this moment. Amy stood in the central command hub with Michelle and watched the tactical display. The holographic screen showed little red dots representing the Zerathian soldiers moving through the station's corridors. Each red dot began to disappear as the women engaged and defeated them one by one. The commander could not help but smile. This was what she had trained for. This was why she had believed in her team when no one else did. The Zerathian commander was growing angrier with each passing moment. His elite assault teams were being dismantled by inferior beings, by humans, by women. His pride was wounded in a way he had never experienced before. He ordered his ship to begin a direct assault on the station, while his remaining soldiers fought inside. Massive energy weapons fired from the warship and the entire station shook violently. Alarms screamed through every corridor. People gripped railings to stay on their feet. The shields that Caroline had designed began to glow with brilliant blue light as they absorbed the incoming fire. The chief engineer sat in the engine room, monitoring the power distribution systems. Sweat dripped down her face as she worked with perfect precision. One wrong move and the shields would fail. One moment of hesitation and everyone would die. But Caroline did not hesitate. She had spent years being told she was not good enough, and she refused to accept that judgment. She rerouted power with the skill of someone who had memorized every circuit in the station. The shields held. The weapons fire continued, but the shields continued to hold. On the bridge of the Zerathian warship, Commander Krell pounded his massive fist on the armrest of his command chair. His second officer stood nearby, terrified and uncertain. The commander's voice was filled with rage as he demanded to know how this was possible. How could a small human station stand against a Zerathian warship? How could women fight like soldiers? How could this be happening to him? The second officer had no answers. No one had ever told Commander Krell that no. No one had ever stood against him and refused to break. No one had ever shown him that his assumptions about strength and power were wrong. Michelle made a decision that would change the course of the entire battle. She called Caroline and told her to prepare the secret weapon. Years ago, the chief engineer had found something in the asteroid where the station was built. It was ancient technology, left behind by a race that had vanished from the galaxy thousands of years ago. Caroline had spent months studying it and had finally figured out how to use it. The Zarathian warship's sensors had never detected it because they did not know what to look for. Now it was time to reveal it. A massive beam of pure energy erupted from the asteroid itself, striking the Zarathian warship directly on its weakest point. The impact was tremendous. The ship rocked violently. Alarms began sounding throughout its corridors. The commander's officers screamed that they had taken critical damage to the reactor cooling systems. Commander Krell stood in his command center, realizing for the first time in 400 years that he might lose. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had conquered 17 planets. He had destroyed hundreds of ships. He had enslaved millions of beings. And now he was being beaten by humans, by women, by people he had considered beneath him. Michelle watched the Zarathian warship begin to lose power. Lights flickered across its massive hull. Systems shut down one by one. The weapons fire stopped. The shields on Station Omega began to glow less brightly as the attack ceased. In the corridors of the station, the remaining Zarathian soldiers realized they were abandoned. Their ship was dying. Their commander was defeated. They began to surrender one by one, laying down their weapons and raising their hands. Rebecca accepted their surrender with calm professionalism. She ordered her teams to secure the prisoners and ensure they were treated with respect, even though these soldiers had come to destroy them. That was the difference between the women of Station Omega and beings like Commander Krell. The women showed mercy. The women treated even their enemies with dignity. The Zarathian soldiers who had expected to be executed or tortured were instead given food and medical treatment. Some of them began to understand in that moment that humanity was different from anything they had encountered before. Michelle made her way to the communications room and composed a message to the Zarathian warship. She spoke in a calm voice, each word chosen with care. She did not gloat or mock or celebrate. She simply stated what had happened. The women of Station Omega had defeated the mighty Commander Krell. The Zarathian Empire would learn that they could not conquer humanity. The women of Earth would fight. They would resist, and they would not be defeated. As Sarah transmitted the message, people throughout the station began to realize what they had accomplished. They had beaten an enemy that should have destroyed them. They had defeated warriors that were stronger and more experienced. They had done the impossible. In the engine room, Caroline stood surrounded by her team. They embraced each other, tears flowing freely. In the security sections, Rebecca and her soldiers allowed themselves a moment to feel pride in their achievements. In the medical bay, Lisa prepared to treat the wounded, knowing that the battle was finally over. And in the command center, Captain Michelle stood before the observation window and looked out at the crippled Zarathian warship floating in space. She thought about every woman who had ever been told she was not good enough. She thought about every scientist dismissed for her gender. Every soldier held back because of her appearance. Every dreamer told to give up and accept less. Today, all of those women were vindicated. Today, the galaxy learned that women of Earth would not accept being second best. Today, everything changed. The hours after the battle were chaos and confusion mixed with relief and exhaustion. The women of Station Omega moved through their duties like people walking in a dream. Every muscle ached. Every person was covered in dust and ash and the residue of combat. But they were alive. They had survived. The first priority was damage assessment. Caroline led teams through every section of the station, checking the structural integrity of walls and corridors. The station had been designed to be tough, but nothing could have prepared it for a direct assault from a warship the size of a mountain. There were fires to put out and power systems to restore and radiation leaks to contain. The chief engineer worked without sleeping, driven by a determination that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her physical body. She had designed the shield systems that saved them. She had created the stealth technology that kept them hidden. She had modified the ancient weapon that had crippled the Zarathian ship, and now she would not rest until every system was functioning again. Lisa worked in the medical bay treating the injured. None of the women had been killed, but many had been wounded by weapons fire or debris or the violent shaking of the battle. The medical officer moved from patient to patient with steady hands and gentle words. She checked wounds and dispensed medicine and made sure that everyone knew they would be okay. Her calm presence had a way of settling people's nerves and helping them believe that they would recover. Rebecca moved through the station with a detail of security officers, checking on every corner and every person. She spoke to each woman individually, asking about their condition and their families back on Earth. She made sure everyone knew that they had done well, that they had fought with honor and courage. The security chief had been told her entire life that her natural aggression was a flaw. Now she understood it was exactly what had saved them all. Amy sat in the command center, monitoring all communications and watching the Zarathian warship carefully. The massive ship was still crippled, still dark and silent. There were no indications of further attack, but Amy did not lower her guard. She had seen too much in her life to believe that danger ever truly went away. Sarah worked with the communication systems, trying to restore full function. She had received recognition and praise from the other women for her quick detection of the Zarathian ship. But Sarah did not think about recognition. She thought about what came next. What would happen when the rest of the Zarathian Empire learned about this defeat? What would they do in response? Would they send more ships? Would they come looking for revenge? Michelle moved through the station like a ghost, checking on each member of her team. She made sure Caroline had food and water. She made sure Lisa had help with the worst of the medical cases. She made sure Amy was relieved from her station before exhaustion made mistakes inevitable. She made sure Rebecca knew that her security work had been flawless. She made sure Sarah understood that her detection systems had saved countless lives. And when all of that was done, Michelle finally allowed herself to sit down and rest. She sat in her quarters with the door locked and let herself feel the weight of everything that had happened. She had led her team into battle. People could have died. Some of the women could have been seriously injured. But instead, they had achieved something remarkable. They had proven something to themselves and to the galaxy. They were not weak. They were not helpless. They were warriors. Later that day, Michelle was contacted by the Zarathian commander. She accepted the communication, curious about what he had to say. When his image appeared on her screen, she barely recognized him. Commander Krell's pride had been stripped away. His certainty had been replaced by confusion. He was still physically massive and intimidating, but something fundamental had broken inside him. He told Michelle that he had conquered 17 planets. He had killed millions in his long life. He had believed that strength was everything and that the weak deserved to be conquered. But now he said he did not know what to believe anymore. He had been defeated by beings he considered inferior. He had been beaten by women. The realization had shattered his entire understanding of the universe and how it worked. Michelle spoke to him with respect. She did not mock him or celebrate his defeat. Instead, she explained something that she hoped he would understand. Strength, she said, was not just about physical power. True strength came from courage and intelligence and the will to fight for something that mattered. The women of Station Omega had been given less respect and fewer opportunities their entire lives, but they had never stopped believing in themselves. That belief had made them unbreakable. Commander Krell was silent for a long time after she finished speaking. Then he said something that Michelle did not expect. He said that he would tell his people about this. He said that the Zarathian Empire would learn that humans could not be conquered through force alone. He said that perhaps in time things would change. Perhaps the galaxy would become a place where different kinds of strength were recognized and respected. Michelle ended the communication feeling something like hope. She did not know if the Zarathian commander meant what he said. She did not know if one defeat would truly change the way the Zarathian Empire viewed the universe. But she knew that the women of Station Omega had done something important. They had shown that women could fight. They had proven that women could win. They had demonstrated that women deserved to be taken seriously as warriors and leaders and commanders. In the days after the battle, messages began arriving from human colonies and space stations throughout the sector. The women of Earth had heard what happened at Station Omega. They had heard that a small group of women had defeated a Zarathian warship. The messages were filled with hope and pride and a new sense of possibility. Suddenly, women who had accepted that they would never advance in the military began to question that assumption. Women who had been told they were not capable of combat positions began to wonder if that was really true. Women who had been dismissed and underestimated began to understand that they had far more power than anyone had given them credit for. The ripples from the battle at Station Omega spread outward like waves moving across a still pond. The galaxy would never be quite the same again. 3 months after the battle, Station Omega looked completely different. The scars of combat had been repaired. The weapons systems had been upgraded and expanded. The stealth technology had been refined and improved. But the most important change was not visible on any screen or in any report. The change was in the women who worked at the station. They moved with confidence now. They spoke with authority. They knew that they were capable of extraordinary things and that knowledge showed in everything they did. Michelle stood in the observation window of the command center and looked out at the stars. Below her, the station hummed with activity. Scientists conducted research. Engineers maintained systems. Soldiers trained for the future. It was a place of purpose and meaning, a place where women were respected and valued. The commander had received a promotion and an expanded mandate. She was now responsible for overseeing the defense of an entire sector of space. More stations were being built. More women were being recruited. More resources were being devoted to creating a military force that could protect humanity against any threat. Caroline had become the most sought-after engineer in the entire human military. She had designed weapon systems and shield technology that other civilizations wanted to study and learn from. But Caroline remained at Station Omega. She wanted to continue working with Michelle and the team that had fought alongside her during the battle. More than that, she wanted to train the next generation of engineers who would build the future of human space exploration. Amy had been given command of the tactical division for the entire sector. Young soldiers came to Station Omega to train under her. They learned that tactics and intelligence could overcome superior numbers. They learned that strength came from preparation and planning and understanding your enemy. They learned that women could be just as good at warfare as men, and often better. Lisa had transformed the medical bay into a training center for military medicine. She taught other doctors and nurses how to treat combat wounds in zero gravity, and how to make life or death decisions in seconds. Her compassion mixed with competence had saved countless lives, and now she was saving countless more by teaching others what she knew. Rebecca had established a security academy at the station. New soldiers came to learn from her about hand-to-hand combat and tactical positioning, and how to fight against enemies that were larger and stronger. She taught them that the mind was just as important as the body in combat. She taught them that strategy could defeat strength. She taught them that women belonged in combat roles and deserved to be recognized as the warriors they were. Sarah had become the chief of communications for the Human Military Command. Her quick thinking during the Zorathian attack had saved countless lives. Now she was designing communication systems that could not be jammed or intercepted. She was creating networks that would allow human forces to coordinate across vast distances. She was ensuring that humanity could respond quickly to any threat. 6 months after the battle, Michelle received a personal communication from the Zorathian Empire. It was not Commander Krell this time. It was his successor, a younger Zorathian who had studied the battle reports and learned from what happened. The new commander told Michelle that the Zorathian Empire was changing. They were re-evaluating their strategies and their assumptions about what made a civilization strong. They were beginning to understand that conquest through force alone would never work against enemies who fought for survival. The galaxy, the new commander said, was beginning to change. Other civilizations were watching what humanity had done. Other species were beginning to question their own assumptions about gender and capability and strength. The women of Earth had started something that went far beyond the battle at Station Omega. They had started a revolution in how the galaxy thought about power and weakness, and what it meant to be strong. 1 year after the battle, a celebration was held at Station Omega. Women from across human space came to honor the soldiers who had defeated the Zorathian warship. They came to celebrate not just a military victory, but a triumph of belief over doubt. Michelle stood before a massive gathering of women in dress uniforms and gave a speech that would be remembered for generations. She spoke about the women who had fought in the battle. She spoke about their courage and their intelligence and their refusal to accept that they were anything less than equal to any warrior in the galaxy. She spoke about the future and what it could hold if women continued to believe in themselves and support each other. She spoke about the journey that had brought them all to this moment. She told them that every woman who had ever been told she was not good enough, not strong enough, not brave enough had proven that judgment wrong. Michelle looked out at the faces of the women listening to her. She saw tears and smiles and pride written across their features. She saw Amy and Caroline and Lisa and Rebecca and Sarah standing together, unified by everything they had endured. She saw younger women who had not been at the station during the battle, women who had come because they believed in what the women of Station Omega represented. She saw the future, and it was bright with possibility. In the years that followed, the story of Station Omega spread throughout human space and beyond. It became a legend, a tale told to young soldiers learning about their history. It became proof that women could fight and lead and protect. It became a symbol of what could be accomplished when people believed in themselves and each other. The galaxy had learned something important that day when the women of Station Omega defeated Commander Krell and his mighty warship. They learned that strength came in many forms. They learned that the most dangerous enemy was not the one who was strongest or most heavily armed, but the one who refused to give up. They learned that women of Earth were not to be underestimated. They learned that the age of easy conquest was over, and the age of human reckoning had begun. Michelle looked at her team one final time as the celebration ended. She thought about the scared women she had found at the station that first day. She thought about how she had believed in them when they had not believed in themselves. She thought about everything they had accomplished together, and she smiled knowing that this was just the beginning. The future belonged to women like these. The future belonged to anyone who refused to accept that they were anything less than extraordinary. The future belonged to humanity,